My name is Nadia, and I'm 25 years old. For 3 years, my sister told me our mother couldn't speak. She told me our mother didn't recognize faces. She told me visiting would only cause pain, mine and hers, and that the kindest thing I could do was stay away and remember Mama the way she was. I believed her. For 3 years, I stayed away. I grieved a living woman from 30 miles down the road. I drove past the exit to her care facility on Route 17 twice a week on my way to work, and I didn't turn off because my sister said there was no point. My mother died 4 months ago, and 1 week after the funeral, a woman I'd never met told me the truth. My mother could speak. She recognized people. She asked for me by name. My name, Nadia, spoken out loud, clearly, to nurses and aides and the daughter of her roommate. For 3 years. She asked and asked and asked, and my sister intercepted every message, blocked every path, and kept me away. Not to protect me from pain, to protect herself from losing control of $210,000 she'd been siphoning from our mother's accounts. My mother died asking for me, and I wasn't there. Because my sister told me Mama wouldn't know the difference. She knew the difference. She knew it every single day. If that sentence hit you somewhere in the chest, if you know what it feels like to find out you missed something that can never be recovered, stay with me. This story doesn't have a happy ending, but it has a true one, and sometimes that's more important. Like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments about someone you wish you'd had more time with. I want to hear their name. Let me take you back. Not to the care facility, to the kitchen. Because that's where my mother lived. Really lived. And that's where this story begins. I grew up in a shotgun house on Hamlin Street in Tidewater, Virginia, a small community on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay where the air smells like salt and engine oil and whatever your neighbor is cooking. Our house was narrow and long, the way shotgun houses are, with rooms lined up one behind the other like train cars. The kitchen was at the back, facing a small yard with a persimmon tree that dropped sticky orange fruit every October. My mother, Josephine Sorrell, was a home health aide who worked 12-hour shifts caring for elderly patients across 3 counties. She was 5'2" with thick arms and a laugh that came from her stomach and shook her entire body. She wore orthopedic shoes 6 days a week, and on Sundays she wore sandals that showed the calluses on her feet, and she didn't care who saw them. "These feet have earned every bump," she told me once, wiggling her toes on the porch. "Don't ever be ashamed of what hard work looks like, Nadia." She cooked the way some people pray, with devotion, repetition, and absolute faith that the ritual mattered. Her specialty was shrimp étouffée, not the restaurant kind, the kind that takes 4 hours and fills the house with a smell so thick you can almost see it. Roux the color of peanut butter, stirred for 45 minutes without stopping. The holy trinity, onion, celery, bell pepper, diced so fine they melted into the sauce. Bay shrimp from the market on Main Street added last, just enough heat to turn them pink. She kept the recipe on a single index card, yellowed, grease-stained, written in her cursive, which leaned hard to the right like the letters were in a hurry. The card lived in a wooden recipe box on the counter next to the stove. I used to stand on a step stool beside her and read the card out loud while she cooked. 1/3 cup flour, I'd read. Good. Now what? Stir until the color of... I'd squint at the handwriting. Peanut butter? Peanut butter. Not almond butter, not cashew butter. Peanut butter. The cheap kind. Skippy color. You remember that, Nadia. I remember it. Skippy color. I've never forgotten. When I was 12, she let me make a photocopy of the recipe card at the library on Bayview Avenue. 10 cents. I folded it into quarters and kept it in my nightstand drawer. The original stayed in the wooden box in the kitchen. It lived there for as long as I lived in that house. When I moved out, the card stayed. When my mother had her stroke, the card stayed. When my sister took over the house and everything in it, the card disappeared. Like a lot of things Camille touched, it went from being shared to being controlled to being gone. My sister, Camille Sorrell, was 6 years older than me. Growing up, 6 years is an ocean. She was always in a different phase. Middle school when I was in elementary. High school when I was still watching cartoons. Moved out by the time I was 12. We weren't close the way sisters in movies are close. We were connected by blood and geography and the kitchen table where Mama served étouffée on Sundays, and that was enough. Or I thought it was. Camille was organized. She was the one who kept the family calendar on the refrigerator. She was the one who reminded Mama about bill due dates. She was the one who filed the taxes when Mama's handwriting got too shaky for the forms. She was responsible in a way that looked like love, but was actually something closer to control. The kind of person who helps you because helping you means they decide how things are done. I didn't see it clearly when I was young. I saw a big sister who handled things. Mama saw it too, and she was grateful. She worked 60-hour weeks and she was tired, and having a daughter who managed the paperwork was a relief she didn't question. Camille keeps the ship running, Mama said once. And Nadia, you keep the heart beating. She meant it as a compliment to both of us. But what I heard, what Camille heard too, was a division. One daughter was essential for function, the other was essential for feeling. And in a family where the bills were tight and the shifts were long and survival was a daily project, function won. Every time. Camille knew where every document was. She knew the account numbers, the insurance policies, the deed to the house. She knew Mama's social security number the way most people know their own phone number. She had power of attorney drafted and signed by the time she was 26, 4 years before Mama's stroke. Just in case, she said. Just in case. The most dangerous phrase in a family with unequal information. I became a veterinary technician because I liked animals more than systems. I liked the simplicity of diagnosis. An animal can't lie to you about where it hurts. They show you with their body, their behavior, their eyes. You learn to read what isn't said. You learn to notice when something is off, even when the surface looks fine. I was good at it. I worked at Bayside Animal Clinic on Route 17, 20 minutes from Hamlin Street, treating dogs and cats and the occasional goat from the hobby farms in Matthews County. Dr. Pauline Vesey, the clinic owner, told me once that I had diagnostic instincts, the ability to sense when something was wrong before the blood work confirmed it. I could diagnose a limping dog from across the room. I could spot a cat with early kidney failure by the way it sat. But I couldn't see that my own sister was lying to me for 3 years about the most important person in my life. Some instincts only work when you're not the one being lied to. Mama had her stroke on a Tuesday in October when I was 21, and from that day forward, Camille became the gatekeeper, the only door between me and my mother. She locked it slowly. She locked it with kindness, and by the time I realized the door was shut, my mother was gone. The stroke happened at home. Mama was in the kitchen, of course she was, making coffee on a Tuesday morning before her shift. She collapsed beside the stove. Camille found her 20 minutes later. She'd stopped by to drop off a prescription Mama had asked her to pick up. Camille called 911. She rode in the ambulance. She called me from Riverside Regional Medical Center at 7:43 a.m. I was already at the clinic, prepping for an early space surgery on a terrier mix. Mama had a stroke, Camille said. Her voice was flat, controlled. The voice of someone already organizing the crisis. Left hemisphere. They're running scans now. You should come. I drove to the hospital in 19 minutes. I don't remember the drive. I remember the parking garage, the smell of concrete and exhaust. And I remember running through the ER entrance with my scrubs still on and my name tag bouncing against my chest. Mama was in the ICU, tubes and monitors and the beeping that sounds like a countdown. Her face was slack on the left side. Her eyes were closed. Her hands, the hands that stirred Rue for 45 minutes without stopping, were still. The neurologist, Dr. Keene, explained it in the hallway. Left middle cerebral artery stroke, significant damage. The next 72 hours were critical. Speech could be affected. Motor function on the right side would likely be impaired. Recovery was possible but uncertain. She's strong, I said, because that's what you say. She is, Dr. Keene said, because that's what they say back. Camille was already in management mode. She had Mama's insurance card. She had the power of attorney. She was talking to the hospital social worker about long-term care options before Mama had been in the ICU for 6 hours. I sat beside Mama's bed and held her hand. It was warm, limp. I talked to her even though I didn't know if she could hear me. I told her about the terrier I was supposed to operate on that morning. I told her the persimmon tree needed trimming. I told her I'd make etouffee when she came home. Skippy color, I whispered. I remember. Mama didn't come home. After 2 weeks in the hospital and another 3 weeks in acute rehab, she was transferred to Chesapeake Gardens Care Center, a long-term care facility on Route 168, about 30 miles from Tidewater. Camille handled the paperwork. Camille chose the facility. Camille met with the admissions coordinator. I offered to help with every step and was told each time that it was handled. "You've got work, Nadia. I've got this. Let me carry it." She said it with warmth, with the specific tenderness of a big sister shouldering a burden so the younger one doesn't have to. And I was grateful. I was 21, working full-time, emotionally wrecked. Having someone else manage the logistics felt like a gift. It was a cage, but cages can look like gifts when someone holds the door open for you with a smile. The first month, I visited Mama twice, both times with Camille. Mama was in a shared room, 2 beds separated by a curtain. She was awake but unresponsive. Her eyes were open, tracking movement, but she didn't speak. She didn't squeeze my hand. She looked at me the way you look at a window, registering light but not seeing through it. "She doesn't know you're here," Camille said softly, standing behind me. "The neurologist said the damage to the language center was extensive. She can't process faces or names anymore." I held Mama's hand and I talked to her anyway. I told her about work, about a kitten I'd treated with a broken leg, about the persimmon tree. She didn't respond. She just stared at the space above my head. I cried in the parking lot for 20 minutes. Camille stood beside me and rubbed my back and said, "This is why I didn't want you to come alone. It's too hard. Let me handle the visits. I'll tell you if anything changes." I agreed. I agreed because I was broken and tired and because my sister was standing in the parking lot of a nursing home rubbing my back. And the idea that this person, this gesture, this warmth, was a strategy never crossed my mind. Over the next 3 years, Camille became the sole conduit between me and my mother. She visited Chesapeake Gardens. She said weekly, though I now know it was closer to once a month. She gave me updates. No change. She's comfortable. She had a good day, ate well, sat in the garden for a bit, but she still doesn't recognize anyone. I talked to Dr. Amari. He says the damage is permanent. She's stable, but there's no recovery path for the cognitive function. Dr. Amari. I never spoke to Dr. Amari myself. I never called the facility directly. I never requested Mama's medical records. Because Camille had power of attorney, Camille was the point of contact, and Camille told me, gently, consistently, with the patience of a woman who had practiced the lie until it felt like truth, that there was nothing to be gained by going there. "She won't know you, Nadia. You'll sit there and hold her hand, and she'll look through you, and you'll drive home feeling worse than when you came. I'm trying to spare you that. I've been through it. Let me carry it." Let me carry it. She said that phrase so often it became a refrain. The chorus of a song I didn't realize was a lullaby designed to keep me asleep. I drove past the Route 168 exit twice a week on my way to and from the clinic. Every time I glanced at the sign, Chesapeake Gardens, 2 miles, and I felt the pull, the urge to turn, the voice that said, "Just go, just once, see for yourself." But Camille's voice was louder, not because it was harsh, because it was kind, because it came with back rubs in parking lots and gentle phone calls and the steady, convincing warmth of a sister who seemed to be sacrificing everything so I didn't have to suffer. If you're listening to this thinking, why didn't she just go? I understand. I've asked myself that question every day for 4 months. The answer isn't complicated, it's just painful. I didn't go because I trusted my sister. I trusted her the way I trusted Mama's recipe card, completely without checking, because it had always been reliable before. I was wrong. The recipe card was reliable. My sister was not. And while I was trusting her, while I was driving past that exit and choosing not to turn, my mother was 30 miles away, speaking my name to nurses and aides and anyone who would listen, asking where her daughter was, asking why Nadia didn't come. 3 years, 1,095 days, every one of them a day I could have turned off Route 17 and walked into her room and heard her say my name. Every one of them stolen, not by the stroke, by Camille. The stroke took Mama's mobility. My sister took everything else. The cracks started small, the way they always do. Not dramatic revelations, just details that didn't sit right. Moments where the story my sister told me bumped against something and left a mark I couldn't quite explain. The first crack came in the summer, about 18 months after Mama's stroke. I was at the clinic cleaning up after a long day. A Labrador with a foxtail lodged in its ear canal, messy extraction, when my phone rang. The caller ID said Chesapeake Gardens. I answered without thinking. Hello? Hi, may I speak with Nadia Sorrell? This is the activities coordinator at Chesapeake Gardens. I'm calling about your mother, Josephine. My heart jumped. Is she okay? Oh, she's fine. I'm actually calling because we're organizing a holiday craft activity for residents and family members, and your mother mentioned she'd love for you to. The line went dead. Not dropped. Ended. Deliberately. When I called back, the main line rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. I called Camille. Someone from Chesapeake Gardens just called me, I said. An activities coordinator. She said Mama mentioned me. Silence. 1 beat too long. That's new staff, Camille said, her voice shifting into the patient, managing tone. They don't understand Mama's condition. She repeats words sometimes, names, phrases. It's called perseveration. The neurologist explained it. It sounds like recognition, but it's not. It's just the brain looping. She said Mama wanted me to come for a craft activity. Nadia. Gentle, firm. The aides sometimes interpret sounds as words because they want to believe the patients are improving. It's wishful thinking. Dr. Amari has been very clear. Mama's cognitive function hasn't changed. Going there based on a misunderstanding would just hurt you. I let it go. I let it go because Camille had an answer for everything, and because her answers were always wrapped in concern, always delivered with the warmth of someone who had my best interests at heart. Perseveration, looping, wishful thinking. Medical-sounding words that sealed the crack before I could look through it. But I noticed something that night. The call from Chesapeake Gardens had lasted 11 seconds before it was cut off. And when I checked my phone the next morning, the number was blocked. Not by me. Someone had added it to my blocked list. My phone had been in my bag at the clinic while I was in surgery, and Camille had stopped by that afternoon to drop off a container of soup she'd made. She'd been in the break room with my bag for at least 10 minutes. I didn't confront her. I unblocked the number. I told myself it was a glitch, a pocket dial, an accident. Because the alternative? That my sister had physically picked up my phone and blocked the nursing home's number, was a thought I wasn't ready to have. The second crack came about a year later. I was at a gas station on Route 17, the Exxon near the Gloucester turnoff, filling up my car after a late shift. A woman at the next pump looked at me, then looked again. She was in her 50s, wearing a nurse's aide uniform, blue scrubs, white sneakers, a lanyard with an ID badge I couldn't read at that distance. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Nadia?" I looked at her. "Yes?" "You're Josephine's daughter at Chesapeake Gardens?" Yes. How do you know my mother?" The woman smiled. "I was on her floor for about 6 months last year. She talks about you. She's got a photo of you by her bed, the one where you're in your scrubs with a puppy. My vision tunneled. She talks about me? Oh, sure. She says your name all the time. Nadia's a vet. Nadia likes the étouffée. She's slow, you know, because of the stroke, but she gets her words out. Sweet lady, we all love her. The gas pump clicked off. I stood there holding the nozzle, fuel fumes rising around me, my hands going cold despite the warm evening. When was the last time you saw her? I asked. I transferred to another facility about 8 months ago, but she was doing well when I left. I mean, she needs help with everything physical. But she knew people. She definitely knew people. The woman, I never got her name, and that haunts me, finished pumping her gas, smiled at me again, and drove away. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine running, the air conditioning blowing on my face, the Route 168 exit 5 miles ahead. I almost drove there. My hands were on the wheel, my foot was on the brake, the turn signal was ready. 5 miles to Chesapeake Gardens, 5 miles to my mother's room, 5 miles to the truth. I called Camille instead. I ran into someone who used to work at Chesapeake Gardens, I said. She said Mama talks. She said Mama says my name. Who was this person? An aide. She worked on Mama's floor last year. Nadia, aides rotate constantly. They're with patients for a few months. They don't have the clinical picture. Dr. Amari's assessment hasn't changed. Mama produces sounds that can seem like words. I've been through this with the medical team. She said Mama has a photo of me by her bed. Another pause, the kind where I could almost hear the machinery working, the rapid calculation, the selection of the right response. I put that photo there, Camille said. I put photos of both of us in her room. That doesn't mean she knows who's in them. It's about comfort, familiar images. The staff knows this. She had an answer. She always had an answer. And her answers were always reasonable, always clinical, always delivered with the exhausted patience of a woman who had been managing this situation alone, while her younger sister questioned her from the sidelines. I didn't drive to Chesapeake Gardens that night. I went home. I ate leftover pasta standing at the kitchen counter. I looked at the photocopy of Mama's recipe card, still in my nightstand drawer, folded into quarters, the creases softening the words. And I read it the way I used to read it on the step stool beside the stove. 1/3 cup flour. Stir until the color of peanut butter. Skippy color. And I thought about what the aide had said. Nadia likes the étouffée. Not a looping sound, not perseveration, a specific, detailed statement about her daughter, connected to a specific memory, expressed in words that only a lucid person could produce. But I still didn't go, because the habit of trusting Camille was deeper than the evidence against her. Because confronting the lie meant confronting everything, not just Camille's words, but my own compliance, my own willingness to be managed, my own failure to turn off Route 17 and walk through the door. I wasn't ready to face that yet. So I folded the recipe card back into quarters and put it in the drawer and went to bed. 3 months later, my mother died, and the chance to turn off the highway, the chance to walk into her room and hear her say my name, was gone forever. Mama died on a Monday morning in June. I found out at 11:47 a.m., a text from Camille. Not a phone call, a text. Mama passed this morning, peacefully. I was there. We'll handle arrangements. Call you later. 14 words, 3 sentences. My mother's life reduced to a notification between the lunch rush and my afternoon appointments. I was holding a sedated cat when I read it, a tabby named Oliver who needed dental extractions. My hands were gloved. The phone was on the counter. I read the text sideways, through the plastic of my face shield, and I set Oliver down on the surgical table, and I walked out of the room without saying anything to Dr. Vesey. She found me in the break room 4 minutes later. I was sitting in the plastic chair by the window, still gloved, still masked, staring at a water stain on the ceiling. Nadia? My mom died. Dr. Vesey didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "take all the time you need," or any of the things people say. She pulled the gloves off my hands, carefully, finger by finger, the way you handle something fragile, and she said, "Go home. Oliver will be fine. Go." I drove home. I called Camille. She answered on the first ring, composed as always. "It was quick," she said. "She went in her sleep. No pain." "I should have been there. Nadia, she didn't know." Don't say she didn't know. Just tell me about the funeral." Camille had already arranged it. Of course she had. A small service at Greenfield Funeral Home on Wednesday. Private burial at Riverside Cemetery. She'd chosen the casket, the flowers, the readings. She'd written the obituary. She contacted the few relatives who needed to know. "You don't have to worry about anything," she said. "I've got it handled." Handled. The word she'd used for 3 years. The word that meant controlled. The word that meant you don't get a say. The funeral was small, 12 people, a few of Mama's former patients' families, 2 neighbors from Hamlin Street, Camille and me. Pastor Jeffries from Mama's church read scripture and said kind things about a woman he hadn't visited in 3 years because Camille had told him the same story she told me. Josephine doesn't recognize anyone. Visits would only confuse her. I stood at the graveside and I looked at the casket and I thought about all the Sundays I didn't drive 30 miles, all the étouffées I didn't make, all the words my mother might have said if I'd walked through the door. I didn't cry at the funeral. I cried later, alone, in my kitchen, standing at the stove with nothing cooking, holding a photocopy of a recipe card, sobbing into the silence of a house that would never smell like roux again. Helen Broussard found me 6 days after the funeral. She called the clinic, told the receptionist she was looking for Nadia Sorrell and that it was personal, not an emergency, but important. The receptionist, a girl named Kaylee who'd worked the front desk for 2 years, passed me the message with a sticky note. "Helen Broussard. Says she knew your mother. Wants to talk." I called the number during my lunch break, sitting in my car in the clinic parking lot with the windows down and a bag of chips I wasn't eating. "Nadia?" Helen's voice was warm, southern, the voice of a woman who'd been a teacher long enough that she spoke to everyone like they mattered. "Thank you for calling me back. My name is Helen Broussard. My mother, Dolores, shared a room with your mama at Chesapeake Gardens for the last 2 years." "Okay," I said, not sure where this was going. "I visited my mother twice a week, every Tuesday and Saturday, and during those visits I got to know Josephine, your mama." She paused. "Nadia, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me because I think you've been told things that aren't true." The chips fell off my lap. I didn't pick them up. Your mother could speak. Not perfectly. The stroke affected her fluency, and she was slow, and some words came out wrong. But she could communicate. She knew who she was, she knew where she was, and she knew who you were. She said your name, Nadia, almost every time I was there. I pressed my phone against my ear so hard it hurt. She'd say, "Where's Nadia?" She'd say, "Tell Nadia I want the étouffée." She'd say, "Nadia's a vet. She fixes animals." These weren't random sounds, Nadia. These were sentences, specific, detailed, clear. "My sister told me she couldn't." I know what your sister told you, because your sister told the same thing to the staff. She told them that you were aware of your mother's condition, and that you'd chosen not to visit because it was too painful. She told them to direct all communication through her. When your mama asked the aides to call you, they passed the message to Camille. I watched it happen at least 4 times. 4 times. 4 messages. 4 chances to hear my mother's voice. Each one handed to Camille and buried. "There's more," Helen said. Her voice was careful now, precise. "About 3 months before your mama passed, one of the nurses, a woman named Rosa Garza, started helping Josephine dictate messages. Your mama couldn't write anymore. Her right hand was too weak. So Rosa would sit with her and write down what she said. Short messages, a few sentences each. They were put in envelopes addressed to you and given to Camille during her visits. How many? Rosa told me at least 7, maybe more. 7 messages, dictated by my mother, written down by a nurse, placed in envelopes with my name on them, handed to my sister. I never received a single one. Why didn't anyone contact me directly? I asked. My voice sounded strange to me, thin and far away. Camille had power of attorney. She was listed as the sole family contact. The staff followed protocol. All communication went through the designated representative. Rosa pushed back once, asked Camille directly if the letters were being delivered. Camille said yes. Rosa didn't have a reason to doubt her. I sat in my car in the parking lot of Bayside Animal Clinic and I understood, with a clarity that felt like a blade, exactly what had been done to me. Not a misunderstanding. Not an overprotective sister making difficult medical judgments. A deliberate, sustained, 3-year campaign to keep me from my mother. A mother who was asking for me, speaking my name, dictating letters she believed were reaching me. Helen, I said, why are you telling me this now? Because your mama asked me to. Not in those words. But the last time I saw her, the Saturday before she passed, she looked at me and said, "Find Nadia. Tell her I tried." She said it twice. Tell her I tried. Tell her I tried. I sat with those words for a long time after Helen hung up. The parking lot emptied. The clinic closed. Dr. Vesey knocked on my window at 5:30 and asked if I was okay, and I said yes without looking at her, and she left. Tell her I tried. My mother, in a bed 30 miles away, using the words she'd fought to recover, sending a message through the only person she could reach because every other channel had been sealed shut by the daughter she trusted to keep them open. I had one question left. Not about the letters, not about the lies, about the money. Because Camille didn't go through all of this, the isolation, the intercepted messages, the blocked phone numbers, just to protect me from sadness. There had to be something else, something worth the effort. Helen had mentioned it briefly, almost as an aside. Your sister handled all the finances, the house sale, the insurance, your mama's pension. Everything went through Camille. Everything. $210,000 of everything. I didn't confront Camille immediately. I spent 2 weeks doing what I should have done 3 years ago. I investigated. I pulled records. I contacted Chesapeake Gardens directly and identified myself as Josephine's daughter. The administrator, a woman named Mrs. Whitley, was cautious at first. Camille was the designated contact and protocol was protocol. But when I provided my ID, my birth certificate, and a copy of the FTC identity verification form, she gave me access to Mama's file. The file confirmed everything Helen said. Josephine's cognitive assessments, conducted quarterly by the facility's neurologist, Dr. Amari, showed consistent improvement over the first 18 months. By year 2, she was classified as oriented to person, place, and time, with moderate expressive aphasia. In plain language, she knew who she was, where she was, and what day it was. She had trouble finding words sometimes, but she could communicate. Dr. Amari's notes from 14 months before Mama died included this line: patient repeatedly requests visits from daughter Nadia. Family contact, C. Sorrell, informed of patient's wishes. No follow-up visits from second daughter recorded. I sat in Mrs. Whitley's office and read that sentence 3 times. Then I asked about the finances. Mrs. Whitley couldn't give me bank records. That required a legal process. But she could tell me that Chesapeake Gardens billed $4,200 per month for Mama's care, that payments were made from an account controlled by Camille, and that the facility had also processed paperwork for the sale of Josephine's house on Hamlin Street. Camille had listed it as part of a care funding plan in the admission documents. The house on Hamlin Street. Our house. The shotgun house with the persimmon tree and the kitchen where Mama made etouffee. Sold. I checked the county records that afternoon. Sold 14 months after the stroke for $138,000. Combined with Mama's life insurance, $47,000, and 3 years of her pension payments totaling approximately $25,000, the total was roughly $210,000. The care facility bills for 3 years came to about $151,000. That left roughly $59,000 unaccounted for. $59,000 that should have been in Mama's accounts, or designated for her care, or held in trust. Instead, it was gone. Moved through accounts Camille controlled into places I couldn't yet trace. I contacted a lawyer, a woman named Adrienne Polk at a firm in Norfolk that specialized in elder financial exploitation. She reviewed the documents and said, "This is textbook. Power of attorney used to isolate a vulnerable adult and redirect assets. We see it more than you'd think. Usually it's a child." Usually it's a child. Those words sat in my chest like a stone. I organized the memorial myself, not through Camille, not through the funeral home, myself. I reserved the community room at the Tidewater Civic Center on Bayview Avenue, the same building where Mama used to attend holiday potlucks, and where I'd made that 10-cent photocopy of her recipe card at the library next door. I set the date for a Saturday in late August, 2 months after Mama's death. I called it a celebration of life for Josephine Sorrell. I invited everyone I could find. Mama's former patients' families, neighbors from Hamlin Street, members of her church, colleagues from the home health agency where she'd worked. I posted a notice in the Tidewater Gazette. I made 40 handwritten invitations because Mama believed handwritten things carried more weight than printed ones. I invited Camille. She accepted immediately, warmly, offering to help coordinate. "I've got it handled," I said. And I felt the phrase land differently now. Not as relief, but as a locked door. My locked door this time. I also invited 3 people Camille didn't know about. Helen Broussard, who said yes without hesitation. Rosa Garza, the nurse who had helped Mama dictate the letters. Rosa was 43, a certified nursing assistant who'd worked at Chesapeake Gardens for 11 years. When I called her, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I gave those letters to your sister. Every one of them. She looked me in the eye and said she'd make sure you got them. I never received any of them." Rosa's silence was heavy. "I have copies," she said. "I started making copies after the 3rd one. Something didn't feel right. I kept them in my locker. How many copies do you have?" 5. "Bring them," I said. "Please." The 3rd person was Mrs. Whitley, the facility administrator. She came as a professional courtesy, she said, but I think she came because she'd read Dr. Amari's notes and she understood what had happened in her building, under her protocols, on her watch. 51 people came. The community room was arranged with folding chairs in a semicircle, a table of refreshments, including a pot of etouffee I'd made that morning from the photocopy of Mama's recipe card, my first attempt, not perfect, the roux slightly too dark, and a long table against the wall with photographs and mementos. I'd arranged the photos chronologically. Mama as a young woman, Mama holding me as a baby, Mama in her home health aide uniform, Mama in the kitchen on Hamlin Street, apron on, wooden spoon in hand, laughing at something off camera. And at the end of the display, a photo I'd gotten from Helen, a picture taken at Chesapeake Gardens 18 months before Mama died. Josephine in a wheelchair in the facility garden, face turned toward the sun, eyes open, mouth curved in a small smile. Not vacant, not empty, present. Camille arrived at 2:15, 15 minutes before the start. She wore a black dress with a silver necklace. She brought a bouquet of lilies, Mama's favorite, she announced to the first person who'd listen. She positioned herself near the entrance, greeting guests with hugs and the specific warmth of a woman who believed she was the host even when she wasn't. She saw the photo display. She stopped at the final photo, the one from Chesapeake Gardens. I watched her face from across the room, the stillness, the rapid assessment. She looked at me, then back at the photo, then at the room, calculating who had seen it and what it meant. At 2:30, I stood at the front of the semicircle. 51 faces, friends, neighbors, church members. Helen Broussard in the third row, Rosa Garza beside her, a manila folder on her lap, Mrs. Whitley in the back, hands clasped. Camille near the side wall, arms folded, watching. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "Mama would have loved this. Not the formality, she didn't care about that. She would have loved the people. She always said the best part of any gathering was seeing who showed up." Soft laughter, nods, people who remembered Josephine's warmth. "I want to share something with you today that I didn't know until recently. Something about the last 3 years of Mama's life." I paused. After her stroke, I was told that Mama couldn't speak, that she didn't recognize faces or names, that visiting her would only cause pain because she wouldn't know I was there. I was told this by someone I trusted completely, and I believed it for 3 years. The room was quiet. Not uncomfortable yet, just attentive. People leaning forward slightly. 2 weeks after Mama's funeral, I received a phone call from a woman named Helen Broussard. I gestured toward Helen, who nodded. Helen's mother shared a room with Mama at Chesapeake Gardens for the last 2 years. Helen visited twice a week, and she told me something that changed everything I thought I knew. Helen stood. She didn't come to the front. She spoke from where she was, her voice clear and steady, the voice of a teacher who'd spent 30 years commanding classrooms. "Josephine could speak," Helen said. "She was slow. She searched for words sometimes, but she spoke in sentences. She knew her own name. She knew where she was. And she said your name, Nadia, almost every time I visited. She asked where you were. She asked why you didn't come." The room shifted. I heard it, the collective intake of breath, the rustle of people adjusting in their seats, the sound of understanding beginning to form. Mrs. Lorraine Jessup, Mama's next-door neighbor on Hamlin Street for 22 years, pressed her hand against her mouth. Her husband Gary put his arm around her shoulders. Pastor Jeffries, seated near the front, closed his eyes and lowered his head. I could see his lips moving, a prayer maybe, or a recrimination. He hadn't visited Mama in 3 years because Camille told him visits were pointless. Tamara Wells, one of Mama's former colleagues from the Home Health Agency, turned in her seat and looked at Camille. Not accusatory, searching. The look of someone who is rapidly rewriting a story they'd accepted as fact. "There's something else," I said. "In the months before Mama died, she started dictating messages to me through one of her nurses, a woman named Rosa Garza." I gestured to Rosa, who stood, the manila folder in her hands. "Mama couldn't write. Her right hand was too weak from the stroke. So she spoke and Rosa wrote. Short messages, a few sentences each. They were placed in envelopes with my name on them and given to my sister for delivery." Rosa opened the folder. Her hands were steady. "I wrote down what Josephine said, word for word," Rosa said. "I gave the envelopes to her daughter Camille during her visits. I asked Camille directly if the letters were being delivered. She told me yes. I never received them," I said. "Not one." The silence that followed was the heaviest I've ever stood inside. 51 people processing the same equation. Letters dictated by a dying woman, handed to a daughter, never delivered to the other daughter. The math was simple. The implications were enormous. I took one of the copied letters from Rosa, a single page, Rosa's neat handwriting transcribing Mama's words, dated 4 months before she died. "I'd like to read one," I said, "if that's okay." Nobody objected. Nobody moved. I unfolded the page. My hands were trembling. I read my mother's words. The words she spoke out loud in a care facility 30 miles from my house. Words she believed would reach me. Words that were intercepted and buried by the person who was supposed to deliver them. "Nadia, it's Mama. I'm okay today. The sun is coming in the window and it's warm on my hands. I miss the kitchen. I miss the stove. I miss you standing on the step stool reading me the recipe.
I'm sorry I'm in here. I tried to tell them to call you, but they say Camille handles it. Tell Camille to bring you next time. I want to see your face. I want to hear about the animals. Make the étouffée for me. Skippy color, you remember. I love you, baby. Come see me. I stopped. I couldn't read the last line again because my vision had blurred. But the room had heard it. Every word. And every word was a specific, lucid, detailed message from a woman who allegedly couldn't recognize faces or form sentences. Mrs. Jessup was crying openly. Gary's arm was tight around her.
Pastor Jeffries had both hands over his face. Tamara Wells was staring at Camille with an expression that had moved past searching into something harder. The look of a woman who has found what she was looking for and doesn't like it. Camille was against the side wall. She hadn't moved, but her face had changed. The composure was cracking, not from guilt, but from exposure. The particular disintegration of someone whose carefully managed narrative is collapsing in real time, in the one room where it mattered most. She stepped forward, toward me. The familiar gesture, arms opening, the embrace, the public performance of sisterhood. Nadia, sweetheart, this is... Mama was confused. These messages aren't... Don't. I didn't step back. I didn't need to. I just held up my hand, one hand, palm out, steady. The gesture stopped her mid-step. Her arms hung open, reaching for a sister who was no longer reachable. Rosa wrote down Mama's exact words, I said. Dr. Amari's cognitive assessments confirm she was oriented and communicative. The facility records show she requested visits from me repeatedly, and the letters, 7 of them, were given to you personally. Camille's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the room, at 51 faces looking back at her with expressions ranging from confusion to grief to the quiet, devastating recognition that the woman they'd trusted to carry a family had been dismantling it instead. I was protecting you, Camille said. Her voice was smaller now, stripped of the management tone, something raw underneath. You don't know what it was like, being there every week, watching her struggle. You weren't there every week, Mrs. Whitley said from the back of the room. Her voice was calm, administrative. Visitor logs show an average of 1 visit per month over the last 2 years. Camille turned toward Mrs. Whitley, then back to me, then to the room. She was running out of walls. The house, I said quietly. The insurance, the pension. $210,000, Camille. Where did it go? She didn't answer. She picked up her purse from the chair by the wall. She straightened her silver necklace, and she walked out of the community room at 3:17 p.m., past the photo display, past the étouffée on the refreshment table, past 51 people who watched her leave in the particular silence that follows the collapse of a carefully maintained lie. Pastor Jeffries found me afterward. He held both my hands. I should have visited her myself, he said. I took Camille's word. That's on me, and I'm going to carry that. Helen stood beside me for a long time after the room emptied. She didn't say anything profound. She just stood there, present, the way she'd been present for Mama twice a week for 2 years, showing up, bearing witness, refusing to look away. Rosa pressed the manila folder into my hands. These are yours now, she said. They were always yours. I filed a complaint with the Virginia Department of Social Services 2 weeks after the memorial. Financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Adrian Polk, my lawyer, handled the paperwork. She told me the investigation would take months. She told me the outcome was uncertain. Power of attorney cases are complicated, and proving misuse requires tracing every dollar through accounts I didn't control. But the pattern is clear, she said. Isolation, interception of communication, redirection of assets. This is textbook, Nadia, and the facility records support everything. I let the system work, not because I trusted it completely, because I'd spent 3 years letting someone else handle things, and I'd learned what happens when you hand your agency to another person. This time, I stayed involved. I read every document. I asked every question. I didn't let anyone carry it for me. Camille didn't contact me after the memorial. No call, no text, no letter. The silence from her side was total. Not the silence of remorse, I think, but the silence of someone who has lost their audience and doesn't know how to perform without one. Her lawyer sent a letter to Adrian offering to discuss the financial matters in a mediated setting. Adrian responded with a request for full accounting of all accounts Camille had managed under power of attorney. As of today, we haven't received it. Mama's house on Hamlin Street belongs to someone else now, a young couple with a toddler. I drove past it last month. They'd painted it blue. The persimmon tree was still there, shorter than I remembered, or maybe I was taller. There was a plastic tricycle on the porch where Mama's sandals used to sit. I parked across the street and looked at it for a few minutes. I didn't cry, I just looked. And I thought about the recipe box that used to sit on the kitchen counter. The wooden box with the yellowed index cards. The original etouffee recipe. Gone now. Sold with the house, or thrown away, or locked in a storage unit somewhere in Camille's careful, organized world. But I had the photocopy. The one I made at the library on Bayview Avenue when I was 12. 10 cents, folded into quarters, creased and soft. And I had Rosa's letters, 5 copies of messages my mother had spoken out loud and believed were reaching me. And I had Helen, who called me every Sunday evening now, not because she had to, but because Mama had asked her to find me, and Helen was not the kind of woman who broke a promise. Last Saturday I drove to Riverside Cemetery. I hadn't been since the funeral. I brought 2 things. The first was the original recipe card, not the photocopy, the original. I'd found it 3 weeks earlier inside the manila folder Rosa gave me. Tucked behind the 5th letter in a small plastic sleeve was a yellowed index card covered in Mama's right-leaning cursive, grease-stained, soft at the edges. The etouffee recipe. Rosa told me Mama had asked a nurse to retrieve it from the wooden box before the house was sold. She'd kept it in her bedside drawer at Chesapeake Gardens for 3 years. When she started dictating letters, she asked Rosa to include it in the folder. She said it belonged to you, Rosa told me. She said, Nadia needs the card, not the copy, the real one. Not the copy, the real one. My mother, from a bed she couldn't leave, making sure the original recipe, the one with the grease stains from her hands, the one I used to read out loud on a step stool, found its way to me. I knelt beside her headstone, gray granite. Josephine Marie Sorel, 1970 to 2024. Beloved Mother. I placed the recipe card against the base of the stone. It looked small there, a 3x5 piece of paper against granite. But it held more than the stone did. It held 40 years of Sundays. It held the smell of roux and bay shrimp and the sound of her laugh shaking through the kitchen. It held Skippy color. The second thing I brought was a letter, my own. Not dictated, not written by someone else's hand, mine. I read it out loud, kneeling on the grass, my voice carrying to nobody but the headstone and the trees and whatever part of Mama was still listening. I told her I was sorry I didn't come. I told her I believed the wrong person. I told her I'd read every one of Rosa's letters and that I heard her voice in every line. I told her about the memorial, the etouffee I made, slightly too dark, the roux 1 shade past Skippy color. I told her I'd get it right next time. I told her I loved her. I told her I'd keep making it until my hands learned what hers already knew. Then I picked up the recipe card, because it didn't belong to a cemetery. It belonged in a kitchen. My kitchen. Propped against the stove, grease stains and all, where I could read it every Sunday while the roux darkened to exactly the right shade. I made etouffee last night, alone, in my apartment on Route 17. The recipe card was propped against the backsplash. The original, the real one, my mother's handwriting leaning hard to the right. I stirred the roux for 45 minutes. I diced the Trinity so fine it disappeared into the sauce. I added the shrimp last. It wasn't perfect. The seasoning was slightly off. Too much cayenne, not enough salt.
Mama would have caught it at the first taste. She would have clicked her tongue and reached for the salt shaker without saying a word, and fixed it with a single shake. But the roux was right. Skippy color. Exactly right. I ate standing at the counter, the way Mama used to taste things while she cooked. One spoon, eyes closed, letting the flavor settle.
And for a moment, the kitchen smelled the way the kitchen on Hamlin Street used to smell on Sundays. And I was 7 years old on a step stool, reading a recipe card I couldn't fully understand, and my mother was beside me, and nobody had locked any doors yet, and the world was small and warm and complete. My mother tried to reach me for 3 years. She spoke my name. She dictated letters. She saved a recipe card in her bedside drawer. She did everything she could from a bed she couldn't leave, and every path she found was closed by the person who was supposed to keep them open. I can't get those years back. I can't unhear, tell her I tried. I can't undo the drives past Route 168 where I didn't turn off. But I can make the étouffée. I can read the card. I can stir for 45 minutes and not stop. And every Sunday, when the roux hits Skippy color, I can say her name out loud in my own kitchen and know that she heard me once, even if I didn't hear her. If you've ever lost someone and later learned they were reaching for you the whole time, if you know what it's like to find out too late that the silence wasn't theirs, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't. And if there's someone you've been meaning to visit, someone you've been told isn't worth the drive, go. Don't wait. Don't let someone else decide for you. Turn off the highway. Walk through the door. Because the recipe doesn't keep forever, but the love in it does.